My name is Francesca, and I'm 27 years old. I always thought working hard and being responsible would make my father proud. Instead, it got me kicked out of my childhood home so my lazy half-brother Jackson could move into my room after failing college again. I never expected my own father to choose him over me so easily, but life has a funny way of coming full circle. 6 months later, they are at my door begging for help. Let me know where you are watching from and subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, and how I finally stood my ground. I was only 8 years old when my mother lost her battle with cancer. Those early years with just my dad and me were difficult but special. We became a team of two, figuring out life without her. Dad would brush my hair before school, attempting ponytails that always came out lopsided. We would eat cereal for dinner some nights, when he was too tired to cook. Despite the challenges, I felt loved and secure. Everything changed when Dad remarried when I was 10. Stephanie seemed nice enough at first. She brought homemade cookies to our first meeting and asked about my favorite books. She had a son named Jackson, who was 7 at the time. He was a shy kid with a mischievous smile, who immediately took a liking to my collection of stuffed animals. The first year felt like we were building something new. Stephanie would invite me to help bake on weekends, and Dad seemed happier than he had been since Mum died. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift in our household. It started with small things. Jackson would break something, and instead of consequences, he would receive gentle words of understanding. When I accidentally stained the carpet with nail polish, I lost my allowance for a month. When Jackson failed a test, Stephanie would blame the teacher. When I brought home anything less than an A, Dad would ask if I had been studying hard enough. By the time I reached high school, the different treatment was impossible to ignore. Jackson was given a car for his 16th birthday, despite barely passing his classes. I was told I could use the family car occasionally if I maintained my grades and worked part-time to pay for my gas. Dad and Stephanie attended every one of Jackson's baseball games, cheering loudly from the stands, even when he spent most of the season on the bench. When I won the state debate championship, only Dad came, and he left halfway through to pick up Jackson from a friend's house. While Jackson was allowed endless free time to hang out with friends, I worked 20 hours a week at a local coffee shop throughout high school. I saved every penny possible for college, knowing that the college fund my mother had started for me had mysteriously diminished over the years, while Jackson's remained untouched. Despite the clear favoritism, I maintained my determination to succeed. I graduated as valedictorian and earned a partial scholarship to State University. The remaining tuition came from my savings and student loans that I would be responsible for repaying. College was a balancing act of classes, study sessions, and working 30 hours a week at an accounting firm as an intern. I would watch social media updates of Jackson partying at his first college while failing most of his classes. Despite this, my father and Stephanie continued to fund his education, giving him chance after chance. I graduated with honours with an accounting degree and decided to move back home temporarily to save money while starting my career. Living at home was not ideal but financially practical. I kept interactions with my family minimal, focusing on building my professional life instead. For 2 years, I lived in my childhood bedroom, paid rent to my father, and watched as Jackson dropped out of his 3rd college program. He moved back home too, but without the expectation of rent or contribution to the household. He spent his days gaming and his nights partying, while I left for work at 7 each morning and often returned after dark. The inequality was painful, but I reminded myself it was temporary. I was building something for myself, saving for my own place, and creating a future based on my own efforts. I never expected that even the temporary sanctuary of my childhood home would be taken from me so abruptly. I will never forget walking through the front door that Tuesday evening after a particularly grueling day at work. I had just finished presenting my first solo client analysis to the partners at my accounting firm. The presentation had gone well, and I was looking forward to celebrating with a quiet dinner and maybe treating myself to some online shopping. Instead, I found my father, Stephanie, and Jackson sitting around the dining table, an unusual sight, since family dinners had become rare. Something about their expressions immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Dad looked stern, Stephanie had a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes, and Jackson was examining his fingernails with feigned nonchalance. "Francesca, we need to talk," my father said without preamble. No congratulations on my presentation, no asking about my day, just straight to business. I set down my laptop bag and took the remaining chair, a strange feeling of dread washing over me. "Jackson needs a place to stay," my father continued, his tone matter of fact. "As you know, things did not work out at Pacific College. Things did not work out. What a diplomatic way of saying Jackson had failed out of his third college in 4 years after spending thousands of dollars of our parents' money. Since you are settled in your career now, we think it is time for you to find your own place. Jackson will be taking your room. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked from face to face, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was all a joke. You want me to move out of my bedroom in 2 weeks? My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. You are 27, Francesca, Stephanie interjected. Most people your age have their own places. Jackson needs the support right now to get back on his feet. I turned to my half-brother, who finally looked up from his fascinating fingernails. Tough break, Fran, but Dad and Mom think it would be good for me to have a fresh start here while I figure things out. Figure things out, like he had been figuring things out for the past 6 years while I worked 60-hour weeks and still paid rent to live in my own childhood home. 2 weeks should be plenty of time, my father added. You make good money now and you have always been responsible. This is the push you need to fully become an adult. The irony was staggering. I was being pushed out because I was responsible, while Jackson was being welcomed back because he was not. My responsibility was being used against me, twisted into a reason why I deserved less support, less consideration, less love. And what about Jackson? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. When will he be getting the push to fully become an adult? My father frowned. That is not fair, Francesca. Jackson is struggling right now. He needs our support. And I do not. I have always needed your support, Dad. I have always needed you to see me, to value me, to treat me with the same consideration you give him. But you never have. We have always treated you both exactly the same, my father insisted, his voice rising. We have always given you both what you needed. The gaslighting was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Almost. Dad, I worked through high school and college. I paid for most of my education. I pay rent here. Jackson has had everything handed to him and squandered every opportunity. And now you are giving him my room and kicking me out with 2 weeks' notice. Tell me again how that is treating us exactly the same. My father's face reddened. You are twisting things. We supported you through college. You contributed less than 20% of my college costs. You paid 100% of Jackson's 3 failed attempts. Stephanie interjected, her voice syrupy sweet. Sweetheart, we understand this is a surprise, but you are so capable. You will land on your feet. Jackson just needs more time to find his path. I stood up from the table, suddenly unable to breathe in that room for another second. I will be out in 2 weeks. Do not worry about helping me pack. As I headed up the stairs, I discovered that some of my belongings had already been packed into boxes. They had started clearing out my room before even speaking to me. The betrayal cut even deeper. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling I had stared at for so many nights of my childhood. Tears slid silently down my face as I finally accepted the truth I had been avoiding for years. I would never be as important to my father as Jackson was. No amount of achievement, responsibility, or loyalty would ever make my father see me as worthy of the same love and support he so freely gave my half-brother. The next morning, I called my friend Amelia, who immediately offered her spare room until I found a place. Stay as long as you need, she insisted. I cannot believe they are doing this to you. I spent the next 2 weeks packing my life into boxes and making arrangements. My father and Stephanie continued their normal routines, occasionally asking if I needed help in a way that felt more like they were checking on my moving progress than offering genuine assistance. Jackson had already started moving his things into my room, talking excitedly about how he planned to rearrange the furniture. On my final day, as I loaded the last box into my car, my father came out to the driveway. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, or at least acknowledge the unfairness of the situation. Instead, he said, Do not forget to leave your house key. I placed the key in his outstretched hand, our fingers not even touching during this final exchange. Goodbye, Dad. As I drove away from my childhood home, I realized I was not just leaving a house, but also the last remnants of hope that my father would ever truly see me. The first few weeks after moving out were a blur of emotions. I would wake up on Amelia's pull-out sofa some mornings and momentarily forget why I was there. Then the reality would come crashing back, bringing with it waves of hurt anger and a strange sense of liberation. You can stay as long as you need, Amelia repeated each time I apologized for imposing. What your family did is beyond messed up. Amelia's unwavering support was just the beginning. When word spread among our friend group about what had happened, I was overwhelmed by their response. Jared helped me search for apartments during his lunch breaks. Tasha, who worked in real estate, kept an eye out for affordable listings. Michael and Sophia showed up at Amelia's door one evening with comfort food and wine. "This is what real family does," Sophia said, as she hugged me tightly. "They show up when you need them." Her words struck a chord deep within me. Perhaps family was not defined by blood or legal ties, but by actions, by who showed up when it mattered most. After 3 weeks of searching, Tasha called with news about a small but affordable apartment in Westbrook, an up-and-coming neighbourhood about 20 minutes from my office. "The building is older, but the units were renovated last year," she explained, "and the rent is within your budget." The apartment was a one-bedroom with large windows, a small balcony, and built-in bookshelves, a must, that immediately sold me on the place. It was nothing fancy, but it felt like a blank canvas waiting for me to make it my own. I signed the lease the same day. For the first time in my adult life, I had a place that was truly mine, where no one could tell me I did not belong. Furnishing an apartment from scratch on a tight budget was challenging, but also unexpectedly fun. I discovered thrift stores and online marketplace deals. My friends continued to rally around me, with Michael offering his truck for furniture pickups and Jared, who was surprisingly handy, helping me assemble second-hand pieces. 2 months after being kicked out of my childhood home, I hosted a small housewarming party. Looking around at my mismatched furniture and the friends who had become my chosen family, I felt a surge of pride. This space might be humble, but it was mine, created through my own efforts and with the support of people who genuinely cared about me. "Did you invite your dad and stepmom?" Tasha asked carefully as she helped me set out snacks. "No," I replied, surprised to realize I felt more relief than sadness at their absence. "They have not reached out since I left anyway." That was true. In the 2 months since moving out, I had received exactly 2 text messages from my father. The first asked if I had taken a family photo album. I had not. The second was a generic birthday greeting that felt like it could have been sent to anyone. Jackson and Stephanie had not contacted me at all. Their silence spoke volumes about where I ranked in their priorities. Once I was no longer under their roof, it was as if I had ceased to exist in their minds. It hurt, but it also confirmed what I had long suspected: their love had always been conditional. Instead of dwelling on their absence, I focused on building a life that reflected my values. I began taking on additional projects at work, earning the notice of senior partners. I joined a local book club and started yoga classes, expanding my social circle beyond my college friends. And then there was David. I met him at a work event, a client appreciation dinner, where he was representing his company. He was intelligent, funny, and refreshingly direct. "You deserve someone who appreciates your strength," he told me on our 3rd date after I shared a brief version of what had happened with my family. "Not someone who punishes you for it." His words captured perfectly what had happened. I had been punished for my strength, my independence, my ability to succeed despite lack of support. In my family's twisted logic, those qualities made me less deserving of their help, not more worthy of their respect. With David, I found myself opening up in ways I had not with anyone else. He listened without judgment, offered support without trying to solve everything, and showed me what mutual respect looked like in a relationship. At the encouragement of Amelia, I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters, who helped me process the years of unequal treatment and the final betrayal of being kicked out. "What your father did was wrong," Dr. Winters said during one session. "You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to set boundaries." Setting boundaries was a new concept for me. I had spent so many years trying to earn my father's approval that the idea of limiting his access to my life seemed foreign. But as Dr. Winters pointed out, boundaries are not about punishing others. They are about protecting yourself. I began to understand that I had value independent of what my father or anyone else thought of me. My worth was not determined by how much I could give or how little I could take. I deserved relationships that were balanced, where my needs were considered as important as others. As spring turned to summer, my new apartment began to feel truly like home. I planted herbs on my small balcony, hung artwork on the walls, and even adopted a cat from the local shelter, a feisty tabby I named Archie. My life was taking shape on my terms. For the first time, I was not seeking anyone's approval or trying to prove my worth. I was simply living according to my own values and surrounded by people who appreciated me just as I was. I had no idea that while I was building this new life, the one my family had constructed without me, was beginning to crumble. It was nearly 3 months after I moved out when the first hints of trouble in my family began to reach me. I had maintained minimal contact, responding briefly to the occasional text, but initiating nothing. The distance had been healing, allowing me to gain perspective on years of unequal treatment. The first sign came through Aunt Judith, my mother's sister, who had remained in loose contact with my father over the years for my sake. She called one evening as I was preparing dinner in my new kitchen. "Have you spoken to your father recently?" she asked after our usual pleasantries. "Not really," I replied, stirring the pasta sauce I was making. "Just a few texts. Why do you ask?" There was a pause on the line. "I ran into him at the grocery store yesterday. He looked terrible, Francesca, stressed and tired. He mentioned that Jackson lost another job." This was not surprising news. Jackson had never held a job for more than a few months. What was surprising was that my father looked affected by it. Usually Jackson's failures were minimized or explained away. "He also mentioned the business is struggling," Aunt Judith continued. "I got the impression things are tight financially." My father's construction company had been successful for years, providing a comfortable living for our family. It was strange to hear it might be in trouble. I thanked Aunt Judith for the information, but tried not to dwell on it. Their financial problems were not my concern anymore. They had made it clear I was not a priority in their lives, so their problems should not be a priority in mine. A week later, I received a text from Stephanie, the first direct communication since I moved out. "Hi Francesca, hope you are doing well. We should grab coffee sometime and catch up. Miss you." The message was so incongruous with her previous behavior that I nearly laughed out loud. This woman who had helped push me out of my home and had not checked if I had a safe place to land suddenly missed me. It seemed more likely that she wanted something. I responded politely but non-committally. "Thanks for reaching out. Life is busy right now. We'll let you know when my schedule clears up." More information trickled in through mutual connections. Jackson had apparently been spending money recklessly, maxing out a credit card my father had co-signed for. He had also been in a minor car accident while driving under the influence, resulting in legal fees and increased insurance premiums. Meanwhile, my father's business was indeed facing serious challenges. A major project had gone significantly over budget, and a long-time client had taken their business elsewhere. The combination of decreased revenue and Jackson's financial drain was creating a perfect storm. 4 months after kicking me out, my father called. I was in my office at work when his name appeared on my phone screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Hello," I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "Francesca," he said, his voice sounding strained. "How are you?" "I am fine, Dad. Is everything okay?" There was a pause. Yes, everything is fine. I wanted to check in, see how you are doing with your new place." The fact that he was only now 4 months later asking about my living situation was not lost on me. But I kept my response brief and factual, sharing nothing about the emotional journey or the support my friends had provided when he had not. "Actually," he said after I finished my minimal update, "I have been thinking, perhaps we were too hasty in suggesting you move out. If you wanted to come back, we could make room." It was such a transparent reversal that I almost felt embarrassed for him. 4 months ago, I was told I needed to leave because Jackson needed my room. Now they could make room. What had changed? "Thank you for the offer?" I replied, my tone still carefully controlled. "But I am happy with my own place." Kamin. A week later, I learned through a family friend that my father had been telling people I had abandoned the family during their time of need, painting me as the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. "He is telling everyone that you refuse to help them," the friend confided. "That you only care about yourself now that you have a good job." The unfairness of it stung, but it also confirmed I had made the right decision in maintaining my distance. My father was still unwilling to take responsibility for his actions or acknowledge the years of favoritism that had led to this point. 5 months after I moved out, the calls and texts increased in frequency and desperation. Stephanie invited me to lunch 3 times. My father called weekly with thinly veiled allusions to their financial struggles. Even Jackson texted asking if I could help him out with some financial advice, and reading between the lines, money. I maintained polite but firm boundaries, never revealing much about my life, and never offering the financial assistance they were clearly fishing for. I was finally learning that I did not owe them my resources or emotional labor simply because we shared DNA. As the 6th-month anniversary of my abrupt eviction approached, I had created a life I was proud of. I had been promoted at work, my relationship with David was flourishing, and my apartment truly felt like home. I had proven to myself that I could not only survive without my family's conditional support, but thrive beyond what I had thought possible. I had no idea that my peaceful new existence was about to be disrupted by an act of desperation from the very people who had pushed me away. 6 months to the day after I moved out of my childhood home, I was at my desk reviewing quarterly tax projections for a client when my office phone rang. It was Ria from reception. "Francesca," she said, her voice unusually hesitant. "Your family is here to see you. Your father, his wife, and your brother. They do not have an appointment." My stomach dropped. In the 6 months since they had kicked me out, not once had any of them made an effort to see me in person. Now all three were in my workplace lobby, unannounced and uninvited. "Tell them I am in a meeting," I replied automatically. "Ask if they can come back another time." "I already tried that," Ria said. "Your father seems upset. He said it is urgent family business." Urgent family business. Of course it was only urgent and only family business when they needed something from me. "Give me 5 minutes," I said finally. "Then send them to conference room B." I took those 5 minutes to center myself using the breathing techniques Dr. Winters had taught me. This confrontation was inevitable, but I did not have to let it throw me off balance. I was not the same person they had dismissed 6 months ago. I was stronger now, clearer about my boundaries, more confident in my worth. When I walked into the conference room, the contrast between my current self and my family was immediately apparent. I was in a tailored suit, hair neatly styled, projecting the image of the professional I had worked so hard to become. They looked like they had aged years in months. My father's face was gaunt, with new lines around his mouth and eyes. Stephanie's designer clothes had been replaced by a simple blouse that had seen better days. And Jackson, always so casually confident, was fidgeting with the sleeve of his wrinkled shirt, unable to meet my eyes. "This is a surprise," I said, remaining standing rather than taking a seat. "What brings all of you to my office in the middle of a workday?" My father cleared his throat. "Francesca, we need to talk, as a family." "I am at work, Dad. This is not the place for a family discussion." "We tried calling," Stephanie interjected. "You never call back." "I have responded to every message," I corrected her. "I have just been busy building my life after being told I had 2 weeks to move out of my home." The reminder hung in the air between us. Jackson had the grace to look ashamed, but my father pressed on. "Francesca, I made a mistake." His voice cracked slightly. "I made several mistakes with both you and Jackson. I see that now." It was the first acknowledgement of wrongdoing I had ever heard from him. Under different circumstances, it might have moved me, but the timing made his sincerity questionable. "I am facing bankruptcy," he continued when I did not respond. "The business is underwater. We may lose the house." "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and I was. Despite everything, I did not wish hardship on them. "But I do not understand what you expect me to do about it." "We thought maybe you could help," Stephanie said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "You are doing so well. You are always good with money." "You want financial help?" I asked, wanting complete clarity. "After kicking me out so Jackson could have my room, after years of supporting him through multiple failures while I worked and paid my own way, now you want me to bail you out?" "It is not like that," my father protested, but his eyes said otherwise. "What is it like then, Dad? Explain it to me." Jackson finally spoke up. "Look, we know we messed up. Okay, I messed up. But we are family. Are you really going to just let us lose everything when you could help?" The entitlement in his tone, even now, was astonishing. As if my resources earned through years of hard work he had never been willing to do were somehow also rightfully his. "How did this happen?" I asked, directing the question to my father. "Your business was stable for years." Damascus. He explained about the project that went over budget, about losing key clients. What he did not say, but what was implied, was how supporting Jackson's lifestyle and repeated failures had drained their financial reserves. "And what is your plan going forward?" I pressed. "Assuming your immediate financial crisis was resolved, what then?" The three of them exchanged glances. It was clear they had no plan beyond getting money from me. "I think we need to continue this conversation elsewhere," I said finally. "I have clients to attend to now. Can you meet for dinner tomorrow night?" They agreed quickly, relief evident in their expressions. They thought I was going to help them. They did not realize I was simply moving the conversation to a more appropriate venue, where I could set clear terms. As they left, my father turned back. "You look good, Francesca. Your own place, this job. You have done well for yourself." The surprise in his voice said everything about how little he had expected of me, how little he had noticed my potential and hard work all these years. That evening, I discussed the situation with David over dinner at his apartment. "What are you thinking of doing?" he asked, his expression concerned but supportive. "I am not sure," I admitted. "Part of me wants to tell them they made their bed and now they can lie in it. But another part cares what happens to them," he finished for me. "Because despite everything, they are still your family." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Just remember," he said, taking my hand across the table, "helping them does not mean going back to the old dynamic. You can offer assistance without sacrificing your boundaries or your self-respect." His words stayed with me as I prepared to face my family again, not as the daughter desperate for approval, but as a woman who understood her own value. The question of how to respond to my family's plea for help consumed my thoughts for the next 24 hours. I discussed it with David, called Amelia for her perspective, and even scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Winters. "You are in a position of power now," Dr. Winters pointed out. "This reversal is probably uncomfortable for both you and them. The question is not whether you can help them, but under what conditions you would be willing to do so." Her framing clarified something for me. This was not about revenge or withholding help out of spite. It was about establishing a healthier pattern going forward, one where my assistance was not taken for granted and their responsibilities were not shifted onto my shoulders. I chose a casual restaurant for our dinner, meeting a neutral territory where none of us would have the home court advantage. I arrived early and requested a corner table that would afford us privacy for what would likely be a difficult conversation. My father, Stephanie, and Jackson arrived together, the tension in their body language visible from across the restaurant. They had clearly been arguing before arriving. Jackson in particular looked sullen, like a child being forced to apologize for breaking a neighbor's window. After ordering drinks and food, I decided to take control of the conversation before they could launch into their prepared appeals. "Before we discuss your financial situation," I began, "I need to address what happened 6 months ago and in the years before that." My father started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Please let me finish." For years, I watched as Jackson received endless support resources and chances while I was expected to manage on my own. The message was clear: his needs mattered more than mine. When you kicked me out with 2 weeks' notice so he could have my room after failing out of his 3rd college, it was just the final confirmation of where I stood in the family hierarchy. Stephanie looked away, unable to meet my gaze. My father's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. "I have built a good life for myself," I continued. "I have a job I enjoy, an apartment that feels like home, friends who value me, and a relationship based on mutual respect. I did this largely without your help, so when you show up at my workplace asking for financial assistance, you need to understand you are not speaking to the daughter who is desperate for your approval. You are speaking to a woman who knows her worth." Jackson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "So you are saying you will not help us?" "I am saying that my help comes with conditions," I clarified. "I am not giving you money unconditionally, only to watch it disappear while the underlying problems remain unaddressed." The server arrived with our food, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. When they left, my father leaned forward. "What kind of conditions?" he asked, his voice a mixture of hope and wariness. "First, I want to understand exactly what the financial situation is. All the details. Debts, assets, income, expenses, everything." My father nodded slowly. "That is reasonable." Second, Jackson needs to get a job, a real job with regular hours that he keeps for more than a few months, and he needs to start attending financial counseling. "Why do I need counseling?" Jackson protested. "I am not crazy. Financial counseling is not therapy," I explained, keeping my tone even. "It is education about how to manage money responsibly, something you clearly need." Stephanie placed a hand on Jackson's arm. "She is right, Jackson. You do need to learn these skills." It was perhaps the first time I had ever heard her acknowledge one of his deficiencies instead of making excuses for him. "Third," I continued, "I am willing to help create a financial plan and potentially assist with some short-term expenses to prevent bankruptcy. But I am not writing blank checks, and I am not taking responsibility for your long-term financial health." My father looked like he wanted to argue, to push for more, but something in my expression must have told him this was as far as I was willing to go. "What about the house, Waos?" he asked finally. "We are 3 months behind on the mortgage. As I said, I need to see all the financial details before making any specific commitments. If keeping the house is financially viable with a restructured budget, we can discuss it. If not, selling might be the responsible choice. The idea of selling the family home clearly pained him, but he nodded reluctantly. Why are you doing this? Jackson asked suddenly. You could just help us without all these demands. We are family. Yes, we are family, I agreed. Which is why I am offering real help instead of a temporary fix that would allow you to continue making the same mistakes. And it is why I am not simply walking away, which would be entirely justified given how you treated me. The rest of the dinner was tense but productive. We established a time for my father to bring his financial documents to my apartment that weekend. Jackson grudgingly agreed to start job hunting immediately. Stephanie said little, but her expression had shifted from entitled expectation to something approaching humility. As we prepared to leave, my father hesitated, then said, I am sorry, Francesca, for what happened 6 months ago, for a lot of things before that too. It was not a detailed apology. It did not acknowledge the years of favoritism or the damage it had caused, but it was a start, the first crack in the wall of denial he had built around his parenting choices. Thank you for saying that, I replied, not quite ready to say I forgave him, but acknowledging the effort. On the drive home, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction at having stood my ground, anxiety about getting drawn back into their dysfunction, and a quiet sadness for what our family relationship could have been if my father had made different choices years ago. But mostly there was pride in myself. 6 months ago, I would have either refused to help out of hurt and anger or capitulated completely out of a desire for approval. Now I was strong enough to offer conditional help while maintaining my boundaries. That growth, more than anything, told me how far I had come. The weeks following our dinner meeting were a crash course in financial intervention for my family. That Saturday, my father arrived at my apartment with a shoebox full of crumpled bills, bank statements, and tax documents. The financial picture was even worse than I had imagined. My father's business was carrying significant debt from a project gone wrong. The family home had a second mortgage taken out 3 years ago, apparently to cover Jackson's tuition at his second failed college attempt. Credit card debt had ballooned with interest rates approaching 20%, and my father had even taken a loan against his retirement savings. How did it get this bad? I asked, struggling to keep judgment from my voice as I sorted papers on my dining table. My father stared at his hands. It happened so gradually. A little more debt here, another loan there. Jackson needed money for rent, for car repairs, for another chance at school. I always thought we would catch up once business picked up again. Using my accounting background, I created a comprehensive financial plan. It involved negotiating with creditors, consolidating high-interest debt, creating a strict household budget, and temporarily downsizing some aspects of their lifestyle. Most painfully for my father, it meant selling his boat and Stephanie's luxury car items they could no longer afford. Jackson's part of the plan was the most challenging to implement. After years of minimal accountability, he balked at the strictness of the requirements. Get a job within 2 weeks. Any job, he protested during a tense phone call. I have a degree in business. I cannot just work at a coffee shop. You have half a degree, I corrected him. And yes, any legal job that provides steady income. Your choice is not between a coffee shop and a CEO position. It is between a coffee shop and continuing to drain resources the family does not have. It took 3 weeks and multiple missed interviews before Jackson finally secured a position as an office assistant at a small insurance company. It was entry-level work with modest pay, but it was a start. In parallel, he began attending financial literacy classes at the community centre. The first few sessions resulted in angry texts about how the instructor talked down to everyone. But by the 3rd week, something shifted. He called me one evening with questions about setting up a personal budget, actually interested in the material for perhaps the first time in his life. My father and Stephanie made more consistent progress. They followed the budget I created, though, not without occasional lapses. They held a garage sale to clear out years of accumulated possessions. They cancelled streaming subscriptions and gym memberships. Stephanie even took a part-time job at a local boutique to bring in additional income. Throughout this process, I maintained clear boundaries. I helped create financial plans, made phone calls to creditors, and provided guidance. I covered 3 specific emergency expenses when they arose: a critical repair to my father's work truck, a medical bill for Stephanie, and the past due amount on their electricity bill when shut-off was imminent. But I refused to become their ongoing source of funds or to take responsibility for their daily financial choices. When Stephanie called asking for money for new work clothes, I instead helped her create a clothing budget from their existing resources and suggested she explore second-hand shops. The relationship with my family was evolving in unexpected ways through this process. For the first time, they were seeing me as competent and knowledgeable, not just the daughter who needed to be more grateful for what she was given. And I was seeing glimpses of potential growth in them, particularly in Jackson. 3 months into this new arrangement, I received a call from my father as I was leaving work. "Can we meet this weekend?" he asked. "Not about money, I just want to talk." We met at a park halfway between our homes on a mild Sunday afternoon. We walked in silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "I have been thinking a lot about where things went wrong," he began. "After your mother died, I was lost. When I met Stephanie, she had clear ideas about parenting, about family. I let her take the lead because it was easier than figuring it out myself." He paused, watching a young family playing frisbee nearby. Jackson reminded me of myself as a kid, struggling in school, more interested in having fun than responsibility. I think I overcompensated, trying to give him what I wished someone had given me at his age. Second chances, support without judgment. "And me?" I asked quietly. "You are so capable, Francesca, so much like your mother. Strong, independent, determined. I told myself you did not need the same kind of support because you were already succeeding. I see now how wrong that was." It was the most insight he had ever shared about his parenting choices. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement of the disparity I had felt for so long. "The night we told you to move out," he continued, his voice roughening, "I knew it was wrong even as I was saying the words. But I had spent so many years justifying our different treatment of you and Jackson that I could not admit it, not even to myself. I felt the familiar sting of tears, but blinked them away. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want a chance to do better," he said simply. "Not to go back to how things were. That was not working for any of us, least of all you, but to build something new, something healthier." I did not make any promises that day. Years of imbalance could not be corrected with one conversation, but it felt like a genuine step towards something different, something that might eventually heal the wounds of the past. A week later, I was surprised when Jackson asked to meet for coffee. He arrived on time, a small miracle in itself, given his usual casual approach to punctuality. "I wanted to thank you," he said after we had settled with our drinks, "for helping the family even after how we treated you, and for pushing me to get my act together." "How is the job going, mate?" I asked. "It is boring," he admitted with a rueful smile. "But I am learning things. My boss says if I stick with it for 6 months, they will consider training me for claims processing, which would be more interesting and better pay." He fidgeted with his coffee cup. I never realized how much Dad and Stephanie were covering for me, how much they were giving up so I could keep messing around. Seeing the actual numbers in those financial classes was a wake-up call. It was strange to hear such self-awareness from someone who had always deflected responsibility. Perhaps hitting rock bottom financially had provided the jolt he needed. "I am not saying I have figured everything out," he added quickly, "but I am trying, really trying for the first time." As autumn turned to early winter, my relationship with my family continued its cautious rebuilding. We were not close in the effortless way some families are, but we were communicating more honestly than we ever had before. My father's business was slowly stabilizing. Stephanie had acknowledged her role in enabling Jackson and was making efforts to treat me with genuine respect rather than performative affection. And I was learning that forgiveness did not mean forgetting or returning to unhealthy patterns. It meant acknowledging the hurt, setting clear boundaries, and being open to change when it was demonstrated through consistent actions rather than empty words. The journey was far from complete, but for the first time, it felt like we were all moving in the same direction. 9 months after being kicked out of my childhood home, I stood in my newly upgraded apartment, supervising as David and Jared assembled a bookshelf for our combined book collection. The past few months had brought significant changes to my life, some expected and others surprising. My promotion to senior accountant had come through, bringing with it a welcome salary increase and more responsibility. David and I had decided to move in together, finding a slightly larger apartment in the same building I had come to love. The transition had been smooth, our relationship deepening as we created a shared space that reflected both our personalities. Most unexpectedly, my relationship with my family had undergone a transformation I could not have imagined on that painful day when they told me I had 2 weeks to leave. My father's business had stabilized, though it would never return to its former size. He had scaled back, focusing on smaller, more manageable projects and rebuilding his reputation for quality work rather than expansion. The financial plan we had created together had prevented bankruptcy, though they had needed to refinance the family home with a longer term to make the payments manageable. Jackson had surprised everyone by not only keeping his entry-level job but thriving in it. 6 months in, as promised, he had been promoted to claims processing with a modest but meaningful raise. He had moved out of the family home into a shared apartment with 2 co-workers, taking his first real steps toward independence at the age of 24. Stephanie had perhaps changed the least, but even she had shown growth. She had acknowledged during a difficult but productive conversation over coffee that she had favored Jackson out of insecurity about her place in the family. "I was afraid you would always see me as trying to replace your mother," she admitted. It was easier to focus on Jackson where I knew my role was clear. The healing in our family relationships had not come easily or quickly. There had been setbacks and difficult conversations, old patterns that emerged in moments of stress, but there had also been genuine effort and accountability, particularly from my father. The turning point had come 3 months earlier during a family dinner at a local restaurant to celebrate my father's business avoiding bankruptcy. As we waited for dessert, my father had cleared his throat and addressed the table. "I want to make something official," he said, his expression solemn. "Francesca, when we asked you to leave the house to make room for Jackson, we were wrong. Not just practically wrong, but morally wrong. You deserved better from us, from me especially." He looked me directly in the eyes, something he had often avoided during difficult conversations in the past. "I failed you as a father. I told myself I was treating you differently because you were stronger, more capable. But the truth is, I was not giving you what you needed and deserved. I was taking advantage of your strength rather than nurturing it. I am deeply sorry, and I am committed to doing better going forward." The public nature of the apology offered in front of the entire family, rather than in private, gave it added weight. It was not just words spoken to appease me, but a declaration of accountability before witnesses. Stephanie and Jackson had followed with their own apologies. Jackson's had been particularly meaningful, acknowledging the unearned advantages he had accepted without question for years. "I never stopped to think about how unfair it was," he said. "I just took what was given to me and asked for more." Now standing in my new apartment, watching David arrange books on our shelf, I reflected on the journey of the past 9 months. I had gone from being kicked out of my home with little notice to creating a life that was more fulfilling than I could have imagined. The painful experience had forced me to recognize my own worth, to build boundaries, and to demand the respect I deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Read, sir. Dinner still on for Sunday. Jackson is bringing his new girlfriend. Would David like to join us?" These regular family dinners had become part of our new normal, a chance to maintain connection while respecting the separate lives we had built. "We will be there," I texted back. "David is looking forward to it." Later that evening, as David and I enjoyed a quiet dinner on our balcony, he asked, "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out if they had not kicked you out that day?" I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I might still be living in that house paying rent and hoping for approval I was never going to get. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us force us to make changes we should have made long ago. "Do you think you have forgiven them?" he asked. "I have forgiven them enough to have them in my life," I replied, but with clear boundaries and expectations. Forgiveness does not mean pretending the hurt never happened. It means not letting it control your future. That night, as I drifted towards sleep with David's arm around me, I thought about the most important lesson of this journey. Our value is not determined by how others treat us, but by how we treat ourselves. For years, I had accepted less than I deserved because I thought earning love through achievement and responsibility was normal. Now I understood that real love, whether from family, friends, or partners, does not need to be earned through constant proving of worth. We all deserve to be valued simply because we exist to be supported, not despite our strengths, but alongside them. Sometimes it takes a painful rupture to clear the way for this understanding. And sometimes, if we are lucky, that rupture can eventually lead to healing on new, healthier terms. Life would continue to bring challenges, of course. My relationship with my family would likely always require more active maintenance than most, but I face the future now from a place of confidence in my own worth and clarity about what I would and would not accept from those who claim to love me. What is your story of standing up for yourself when others undervalued you? Have you ever had to create strong boundaries with family or friends who took you for granted. Please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through difficult family dynamics, and share your experiences in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat yourself.